Money will have.
Sorry.
Did you hear me?
No.
I bet your money will have a couple of latecomers.
Good evening. Let's begin with our chanting. In order that all sentient beings may attain Buddhahood, from my heart I take refuge in the three jewels. In order that all sentient beings may attain Buddhahood, from my heart I take refuge in the three jewels. In order that all sentient beings may attain Buddhahood, from my heart I take refuge in the three jewels. Whatever the virtues of the many fields of knowledge, all are steps on the path of omniscience. May these arise in the clear mirror of intellect. O Manjushri, please accomplish this. Good evening and welcome. This evening we forge ahead into the tradition of Tsongkhapa and the forefather of the Gelugpa tradition, under the title of the Words of Manjushri and Vajrapani. So we're on page 83 of the source text, and here we have an account of a situation where there's some certain individuals who can speak regularly to high-level bodhisattvas. That's a pretty handy thing. Definitely something that's worth seeking out and asking questions to those bodhisattvas through those means, if that's available. And you might wonder, what would you ask them if you had the chance to ask these great bodhisattvas? What would you ask them? Would you ask them for the fine points of view and meditation? Would you ask them for the secret to long life? Would you ask them for suggestions on how to help in this current dark age? Would you ask them what to wear?
Would it depend who you were talking to? Like, aren't there specialists in different?
Well, Manjushri, if you're talking to Manjushri, what would you ask him?
Oh,
That's what I was talking about in this section here. We have this whole idea that Tsongkhapa found these two gentlemen, lamas, who were able to converse with these high-level bodhisattvas, and he sought them out and had these extensive conversations with them about the view of reality and the nuances of meditative practice. Pretty unusual, although it's not totally unheard of. There's many teachers these days who have visionary encounters with other teachers from the past. I don't know about bodhisattvas on the level of Manjushri and such, but Trungpa Rinpoche apparently had some interactions with the Rigdons. So not totally absent tradition today. It's still alive. So we have a little background on Tsongkhapa J, Lord Tsongkhapa J, born in the Firebird year in 1357 in the far eastern corner of Amdo region of eastern Tibet. That's like north of Kham. Kham is where Trungpa Rinpoche is from, and Amdo, I think, is a little bit north of that. And let's see, he takes novice vows early on. At the age of 6. He is already had received several Vajrayana empowerments even before he was ordained. Engaged in mantra retreats before 6 years old. What are they doing with those kids in Tibet? By the age of about 16, he left home for central Tibet, never to return. For at least the next 20 years, he travels from monastery to monastery throughout central Tibet, studying with many of the most respected Buddhist teachers of his time, mainly in the Sakya, Kadam, and Kagyu traditions. His performance, an interesting word, in debate became legendary, and had a phenomenal capacity for memorization as well as for samadhi meditation. From the time he was about 20, his root teacher was a renowned teacher from the Sakya tradition, Jetsun Vrindawa Shunu Lodro, very famous early Sakya teacher. Tsongkhapa maintained close relationship with him throughout his life, and he also, in addition to sutra philosophy, he also received extensive teachings on the Guhya Samaja root tantra, which is the main tantra of the Gelugpa tradition. It's the main tantra of what's called the Arya tradition of the tantras that comes down from Tsongkhapa Chandrakirti, the Arya Deva Chandrakirti. Strangely, even though they were Madhyamaka masters. On the next page, 84, he had his first meeting with Lama Umapa Pawa Dorje, a former yak herder, turned into Manjushri communicator. They made a deal. Lama Umapa sought blessing of Saraswati, and then received teachings on Chandrakirti's famous Introduction to the Middle Way, while on behalf of Tsongkhapa, he had conversations, conveyed questions and responses to and from Manjushri, respectively. Let's see. So they became retreat buddies, and after supplications to Manjushri, the deity would sometimes appear spontaneously to Umapa, so he could pose Tsongkhapa's questions and relay the answers. His deepest qualms, Tsongkhapa's deepest qualms at the time, concerned the correct view of emptiness and how to understand and manifest the illusory body within the 5 stages of the completion stage of Kriya Samadhi. So the illusory body is one of the main practices of the inner tantric practices, the completion stage practices that one might do after completing the creation or development stage practices of tantra, visualization of deities. One would then progress to the inner yogic practices. And while in the Kagyu tradition we have a system conveyed from Tilopa to Naropa to Marpa and so forth of 6 dharmas, the 6 dharmas of Naropa, often mistakenly called the 6 yogas of Naropa. But in the Guhya Samaja tradition, they use a system of 5 stages that were set out very clearly and elaborately in a text by Nagarjuna, attributed to Nagarjuna, that appears like in the 10th century, called the Panchakrama, the 5 stages. And it also has illusory body practice in it. Regarding the view of emptiness, Tsongkhapa learned from Manjushri that his current view, which reflected his interpretation of Chandrakirti that was prevalent at that time, was not either authentically prasangika nor swatantrika. Manjushri then grants Tsongkhapa a series of teachings on the distinctions between the views of the two, the differences between the different types of belief in a self, called the grasping at self-existence, the 2 types being intellectually acquired and the innate or connate. these translators are using. So two types of belief in a self, innate and acquired. Innate, all sentient beings are born with and possess throughout their existence until they achieve the complete Buddhahood of the 10th or 11th stage Bodhisattva. Whereas the intellectually acquired version is dispelled at the path of seeing. It consists of things like belief that in our personality, in our awareness, in our sense of humor, in our mannerisms, or our memories, and our intellect, our emotions, so on and so forth. The levels of subtlety involved in understanding what is being negated in the context of emptiness. So, famously in the Gelugpa tradition, the way that they train in understanding emptiness is that they take emptiness to be what's called a non-implicative negation, a negation of intrinsic existence. And they spend a lot of time on defining what it is that they're negating when they negate the fixation on true existence. What exactly is that? With the belief that the more precisely and clearly they can identify mistaken view, to that extent they can more clearly identify and experience the correct understanding or realization. The criteria finding the correct view of emptiness and how relative, obscurative reality needs to be understood according to Prasangika, which is one of the more subtle areas of Prasangika Madhyamaka. How's the relative to be understood? It's often sort of talked about in a dismissive way. It's like, just accept relative reality. However, everybody else accepts it. Doesn't matter, don't make a big deal about it. Because it's deceptive, and everybody has their own version. And it's not ultimately real, so you can't quabble over something that's not there. It's like arguing over the height of the son of a barren woman or other features. Tsongkhapa admitted that he could not yet fully understand the teachings he received, but Manjushri exhorted him to continue to supplicate his gurus, engage in sadhana practice to strive and accumulate merit, and in purifying negative karma to reflect deeply upon the meaning of the Vedic treatises. Tsongkhapa then directed Manjushri then directed Tsongkhapa to withdraw from his teaching activities, become a solitary hermit. I like that excuse. Manjushri told me to do that. I'm just following Manjushri's orders, devoting all his time to spiritual practices and to meditation. Tsongkhapa would go on to do that later that year, taking 8 of his disciples with him into long-term retreat. I love the group retreat idea or mode that they follow. It's pretty neat. 8 buddies. Meanwhile, at a certain point during that earlier retreat at Umapa, Tsongkhapa was inspired to temporarily shift from his primary practice of shamatha to make repeated supplications to Manjushri through visualization and mantra recitation. Only a few days later, experienced his own vision of the deity's resplendent form, the first of many such visions that would come throughout his life. So he gained the ability to connect directly with Manjushri. Let's see, there's some description of the various writings that are recorded here. On the next page, on 86, the second full paragraph, it was during this 3-year period of time in the Wolka region from 1392 to 5 that Tsongkhapa was able to devote himself to developing the single-pointed samadhi that would serve as the basis for his later realizations. Another 3 years in retreat, which would in turn become the source of his piercing clarity and confidence in writing and teaching throughout the last 2 decades of his life, till his passing in 1419. It was during a later year-long retreat in the Wolca Valley, 97 to 98 of the 13th century, that 14th century, that Tsongkhapa gained irreversible clarity in his understanding and realization of workings. It sounds like what we might call enlightenment. Enlightenment. No?
Like full enlightenment? That's not just like first Bhumi level?
I didn't say that, did I?
I was wondering myself. And so when
Oh, I see.
you
Yeah.
said enlightenment, that tends to make me think more 10th Bhumi. But I was wondering whether this was more of a first Bhumi kind of fully getting it, or
We're never really told definitively what Bhumi, what stage of the path these gentlemen are on. You hear the phrase "living Buddha." They're Buddha in human form, applied to like the Karmapa and other great beings. Dalai Lama is talked about as being Avalokiteshvara.
right.
But
I understand it's never definitive. I just meant from the point of view of is irreversible clarity in the understanding and realization of emptiness. Does that sound like first Bhumi, or is that more like you've already had the first Bhumi, but there's further clarification later? I'm just, that was more,
to me, it sounds like second path of unification.
okay. Oh, second path meaning before.
Path of seeing.
Okay, got it. Okay.
I don't, that's my opinion.
Talking conceptual.
If Nagarjuna reaches the second Bhumi, the first Bhumi, and the Sangha reaches the third Bhumi, I find it hard to believe that others are going further.
Okay, so this is describing a conceptual certainty rather than a direct experience certainty.
A subtle conceptual, yeah.
Right. Okay, thank you.
I don't know. That's my
It's a good guess.
take on
Your guess is as good as mine, or maybe better.
it. I think many others would be like, "Oh, he was a fully enlightened Buddha," but it was only after this transformative experience that Tsongkhapa began writing his major and definitive works in the middle way, including his masterpiece, Great Lama Chenmo Stages of the Past, complete in 1402. And then another 13 years that he composed an abbreviated version of that work called a concise presentation of the stages on the path to enlightenment, the Lam Rim Chungmo, which was intended more as a handbook for practice and retreat than a comprehensive treatise, and amidst many informal debates and quotations from scripture provided in the great treatise. Nonetheless, in this concise presentation, Tsongkhapa treats a few points in more detail than he had earlier. One such point concerns the precise nature of the non-conceptuality and relinquishment of mental engagement that occur upon actually achieving shamatha, which are not the same as the non-conceptuality that emerges from actual vipassana with respect to emptiness. Another crucial point that Tsongkhapa highlights in this concise presentation is the place of both conceptuality and non-conceptuality in leading to the union of shamatha and vipassana, which is the culminating phase of both transcendent meditation and transcendent wisdom among the six paramitas. It's the crucial section. It is the crucial sections on how to cultivate vipassana dependence on shamatha, and then on how to achieve the union that we include here, which is the heart of our reading for tonight. And sorry for the page rustling. It's loud, right? Sorry about that. Tsongkhapa lived at a special juncture in Tibetan history, time when there was relative political peace, and many thriving monasteries of diverse lineages. And so that's what he did. He wandered around and went to many different monasteries during his life, studying with different teachers. And he enjoyed being within the first 50 years of this historic project called the creation this historic project of the compilation of texts received from the Indian tradition attributed to the Buddha and the great masters of India called the Kanjur and the Tanjur respectively by a Sakya, an amazing Sakya teacher named Bhuta Rinchen Dru. And so he had these as his source for study and memorization. On the other hand, skipping to the next paragraph, it's clear that his insatiable hunger for learning was in part due to his dissatisfaction with many of the explanations he received. His written works show him grappling with diverse points of view and repeatedly takes upon himself to resolve apparent contradictions among ways of interpreting key passages of Indian Buddhist literature. Which is really a cool thing, actually, that, acknowledging that there's numerous really important passages of sutras and shastras, but mostly sutras, that are presented differently by different Indian teachers and by teachers in Tibet, including before Tsongkhapa. So he had that to struggle with or to wrestle with, let's say.
So do you think um, he's like having a debate with himself about this is this and this is this and that doesn't
Yeah, he's
match,
trying to,
and and so what could it mean? And you know,
yeah,
interesting.
he's trying to synthesize these views.
I really appreciated
And,
this particular paragraph, actually. Yeah, because I felt like it sort of humanized him, or it made me feel more connected to him because, I'm constantly reading things and going, contradictory, not very precise. Come on, you guys, get it together.
yeah, very elusive. Often it's like they don't explain the most important part. It's like as if it didn't need to be explained. And then yeah. So we've certainly here in these courses we've struggled through many of them, and I'm sure people have found them on their own in many other texts. So yeah, it is cool to see that someone was acknowledging and doing that, as well as saying, instead of saying, "Oh yeah, they're totally clear," and there's no disconnect or dispute or disagreement. And so then it's also evident that he did not write most of his major works until the last 2 decades of his life. So, at a certain point, he felt a certainty and then just like started churning out a lot of works. He waited until he was sure of his position based not only on intellectual inquiry, but on profound meditative insight and realization before writing most of his major treatises and both Sutra and Chandra associated with his name today. He's famous for these writings, indeed. The excerpts we have chosen, we glimpse the vivid presence and influence of Manjushri. The view of emptiness expressed in Manjushri's Pith Instructions to Tsongkhapa resonates deeply with articulations of the view that later Tibetan history more explicitly associates with the Mahamudra and Dzogchen traditions, interestingly. It's crucial for us to recognize the detailed explanations of the middle way view that appear in Tsongkhapa's mature treatises emphasize the compatibility and indivisibility of ultimate and what these translators are calling obscurative reality. Indeed, the inextricable complementarity of emptiness and dependently related events. Tsongkhapa emphasized these points as representing the authentic understanding of Chandrakirti's interpretation of Garjana, thorough familiarity with Tsongkhapa's biographies. And through that, we can recognize that he himself had finally come to understand these crucial points only in dependence upon the personal guidance of Manjushri at critical junctures in his life. And the translators reference this book that's come out in the last few years by Thupten Jinpa and his biographies. But we should also recognize that Tsongkhapa emphasized these points in ways he saw were needed as corrective to subtle varieties of extreme views that have crept into Tibetan understanding since the introduction of Chandrakirti's work into the Tibetan language in the 11th century. Tsongkhapa revered Atisha, and Tsongkhapa's mature view of the middle way would not have differed from Atisha's, but given differences in time and circumstances, he saw the need to articulate the middle way view with far more elaboration and all in order to guide disciples to the same realization utterly beyond elaboration. So it's an interesting point that he's in sync with Atisha. You have to try to be, or say you are. And also that Atisha did not actually write extensively on the view of emptiness. He has a few little short texts on. Then we come to the mystery of the text transmitted to Tsongkhapa by Lojak Jubchen Namke Gyaltsen. They visited him after emerging from a 3-year retreat, strict retreat, and he had heard from one of Jubchen's teachers that it was said to be an emanation of the Garshana's famed student, Arya Deva, and that he had visions of Vajrapani. Oh, we have another one. We can talk to another bodhisattva through somebody. When they first met, Tsongkhapa saw Jubchen in the form of Vajrapani, while Jubchen saw Tsongkhapa in the form of Manjushri, like recognizing old friends. He received several empowerments from his extensive transmissions of the 3 Kadam lineages of teachings on the stage of the path to enlightenment, the long run, which traces back to Atisha. I had stated, I think last week, that there were 2 traditions, the sort of more study-oriented, more practice-oriented, and there, in fact, I was wrong, and there's 3 of them. And I'm not exactly sure which ones go into Kagyu versus Gelug. Jubchen also received teachings from Tsongkhapa, and there was a deep mutuality in their reverence for and trust in one another. Let's see. Even after his retreat and all the interactions with Manjushri, Tsongkhapa still had unresolved questions. And Jubchen posed these to Vajrapani on his behalf, and the revelation that came as a response is translated here as the final text in this section, which we don't have for tonight. Skipping a paragraph. It's important, so on page 90, the second full paragraph, it's important to note that a large part of the instructional portion of the text, this third text, coming from Vajrapani, matches verbatim the treasure revelation from the Khandra Nyentik. The Dakini Nyentik, hard essence of the Dakini, is found in the collected works of Longchenpa. Verbatim. There, the conversation is between Guru Padmasambhava and Yeshe Tsogyal, and the text is called Golden Garland of Nectar, Q&A. They also have an FAQ, by the way, if you're interested. Though Longchenpa preceded Tsongkhapa, historically we have no evidence that Tsongkhapa, even Lodrog Jubchen, was aware of Longchenpa's writings or treasures. Indeed, Longchenpa kept them fairly secret throughout most of his life. Lodrog Jubchen's father was a Nyingma, and he received Nyingma empowerment when he was 5 years old. But he spent the majority of his life in Kadam Monastery as lineage holder of the works of Atisha. So we have that interesting tendril, as they say in the Tibetan tradition, auspicious connection, auspicious coincidence. There's some description of the 7th Dalai Lama. There's also a text in here. So let's dive in. We have for tonight focus on Shamatha Vipassana writings of Tsongkhapa. So the first one we have is the guidance in the view of the middle way on page 93. Spoken by the noble Manjushri, attributed to Manjushri. It's not that many texts attributed to bodhisattvas in the Tibetan world. As we know, there's millions of texts attributed to Padmasambhava as Terma texts. Anyway, Namo Guru Arya Manjushriye, in italics, presumably being somebody's addition. I don't know if Manjushri would supplicate himself in that way. You never know. and reliance upon vast dependent relationships reveal the nature of existence just as it is. So in reliance upon interdependence, understand the nature of reality. Having gone for refuge, gathered the collections, meaning the two of merit and wisdom, and purified obscurations, meaning the two kleshas and ignorance, or cognitive and klesha obscurations. Meditate upon dependent relationships in their forward and reverse order. The forward order is the development of samsara, and the reverse order is how samsara is undermined and the experience of the entry into nirvana is cultivated. And the famous image is the story of the person who becomes a pratyeka Buddha, and he finds a bone and he traces it back. It says, where does this bone come from? Somebody who was born, and why were they born? And this person goes through the nidanas and understands how to undo samsara. Becomes the pratyeka Buddha. Trungpa Rinpoche tells this story.
That's the reverse order?
That is the reverse order, yeah, of the nidanas. I, the fortunate one who practices to accomplish enlightenment, once settled in the samadhi of meditative equipoise, upon the manifest nature of the sacred body, speech, and mind. So samadhi, meditation, apparently focused upon the nature, the manifest nature of the Trikaya, presumably, sacred body, speech, and mind, and upon the profound practical instructions that all phenomena, whether appearances or emptiness, whether samsara and nirvana, are dependently related and lack any nature at all. One shall come to know the meaning of identitylessness, since the collection of aggregates, body, speech, and mind, is not determined as a self in any way at all, because there is no self apart from this. The traditional way of understanding selflessness by the comparison to the skandhas. The five aggregates, the doors of the senses, the six, the elements, the 12, meaning that senses and their objects, what emerges from the elements, the dhatus, the 18, including the doors of the senses, their objects, and the consciousnesses that arise from them. Virtue and non-virtue, all phenomena, whether appearances or emptiness, whether of samsara and nirvana, are dependently related and lack any nature at all. Interesting, Ladley says, like all phenomena, whether appearances or emptiness, as if emptiness is a phenomenon. And it's a plural noun. This appearance is plural, but we don't have emptiness. Is that a unitary, singular, or plural? Free of arising, ceasing, or remaining, beyond saying it exists or does not exist, it is or is not, free of elaboration, indivisible, profound peace. Whoever understands this passes beyond all sorrow.
What does the word elaboration mean there?
Yeah, so elaboration is, in general, means conceptual proliferation, ranging from on a sort of mundane level to belief in appearances as existing the way they appear, and then elaboration in a more subtle sense, philosophical sense, refers to the process of projection, what we would call projection, which takes two forms as traditionally presented. One form is what's called superimposition. We project what's not there upon the basis of designation. So let's say our eyes discern certain color, configuration of colors and shapes, and upon the basis of those colors and shapes, we designate a chair or a table. So we superimpose. And the other is denigration, where we undermine appearances as being completely void, and thereby we ignore karma. So we go too far in negating. We don't understand that phenomena do function on the relative level according to the law of karma in the way of interdependent origination. So those are the two, superimposition and denigration are the two types of conceptual elaboration, which in general just means the proliferating of projections. Sue.
Oh, well, so, okay, so now we've gotten all that. And so what is he saying? Is he saying, um, basically through all this practice, I'm clear on no self, and based on more, I'm clear of no phenomenon. And so, um, yeah.
If I could add something there, my take on this little piece is that it's actually a kind of a lovely little summary of how to practice for
Mhm,
us.
mhm,
It's not so much that he's saying, I mean, this is basically like an instruction,
mhm.
and it's very versified and very concise, but it's basically saying, do this, and that's where you get to is the end game is no elaboration, freedom from elaboration. So it's a very, very pithy meditation instruction in a sense,
Thank you.
and specifically for the kind of analytic vipassana type uh, meditation that is referenced in some of the other things.
Yeah, so the paragraph that's on the bottom of the prior page. The fortunate one in practice is to accomplish enlightenment once settled in the samadhi meditative equipoise, focused on the manifest nature of the sacred body, speech, and mind, using which is the traditional object for meditation in many Mahayana sutras, is the form of the Buddha. And upon the profound practical instructions that all phenomena, whether appearances or emptiness, samsara, nirvana, are dependently related and lacking in nature at all. Going back to the first sentence, I shall come to know the meaning of identitylessness, since the collection of aggregates is not determined as a self in any way at all, because there's no self apart from this. The five aggregates, etc., are all dependently related, lacking in nature at all. And then the final statement is, this is the true nature, which is sort of interesting because the tradition of Tsongkhapa has turned into a tradition that says very little about the result of enlightenment, the experience of one who has undermined or uprooted the belief in the existence of phenomena. But here Manjushri says the true he doesn't say what is free of arising, but it's understood that nirvana, or the true nature, is free of arising, ceasing, or remaining beyond. It's a saying, but I think it's more like beyond what could call it exists or it does not exist. It is or it is not. It is free of elaboration. It is beyond our conceptual frameworks. It is indivisible, it's unitary, it's one. It is profound peace, the traditional description of nirvana by the Buddha from the earliest teachings. Whoever understands this passes beyond all sorrow, the definition of nirvana. Excuse me 1 second, I have to check on my dog. She's going crazy. I'll be right back. Yuki, yuki, yuki. Yuki. Come on. Okay. She goes wild every once in a while. So can we shift to the next text? So as the translators said in their introduction, this is the final section on the presentation of Vipassana, or even after that, the union of shamatha Vipassana from Tsongkhapa's text, the middle length or the shorter version of the stages of the path to enlightenment, and it's much more practically oriented to the actual practice of shamatha Vipassana. Alan Wallace had translated the shamatha section years before in a book called Balancing the Mind, something like that. And then there's the Vipassana section, which, as you saw in a note somewhere here, was translated by Hopkins in a book called Tsongkhapa's Final Exposition of the Middle Way, something like that. And I circulated that. Where was that? That was somewhere he said that in the footnotes. Anyway, so let's go through this section, this presentation. And if we have time, we'll go back to the section of the text just before that I circulated by PDF. On the union of shamatha Vipassana from the concise presentation of the stages on the path to enlightenment. And by the way, the actual term used for the title of chung no means small or precise or concise, as opposed to large. The other text is called the great chenmo, like Chakya Chenpo. Great. But sometimes people refer to this as the middle length treatise because there's another text by him that's very small that they consider to be the concise presentation of the stages of the path. And that's called the Three Principal Aspects of the Path, very famous text that even the current Karmapa, Bukit Trinley Dorje, has done numerous commentaries. Here's the third part of the section on how to cultivate Vipassana, the main presentation of how to cultivate Vipassana independence upon shamatha. If you do not find the view of identitylessness, then go back to do not pass go. Go back to the beginning and start over again. So no matter what kind of meditation you undertake, that meditation will not rest in the meaning of suchness. Therefore, you must find this view. But even if you come to understand this view when it comes time to meditate upon suchness, if you do not first bear that view in mind and then meditate by settling upon it, it will not turn into a meditation upon suchness. Therefore, if after each session in which you begin by analyzing the view, you just place yourself in a state of not thinking of anything, this is not what is meant. It means to sustain the view of suchness. So here, he's launching into what becomes the sort of very famous distinction between Tsongkhapa and the traditions of at least the Kagyu and Enigma in terms of how to practice Vipassana. The difference being sort of described as what degree of analysis happens in actual meditation. And let's say Trungpa Rinpoche in particular did not favor analysis and meditation itself, but seemed to favor doing the analysis outside of meditation, since he did teach that numerous times, numerous ways. Tashi Namgyal in his Moonbeams of Mahamudra also makes a point of differentiation with Tsongkhapa on this, saying, once you've established the understanding through the analysis, you don't need to keep repeating the analysis. You rest in that understanding, that sort of visceral experience that one gains from the understanding, being a sort of release of clinging, sort of visceral reaction, letting go of clinging to something that's not there, which we might imagine like if you have an apple that you want to eat, somebody takes it and eats it, you might be pissed at them, you might want to search for a different apple, but you would no longer cling to the idea of eating that apple since that apple had been eaten. Okay, so back to the text. While bearing the view in mind, if you merely familiarize yourself with settling in your recollection of the view, this is nothing but the practice of sustaining shamatha, as explained earlier. It is not, however, the point of the scriptures that explain how to sustain vipassana as distinct from shamatha. So there you go. This is nothing but I just went for a hike. Just pulling some ticks off myself. Okay. While bearing the view in mind, if you merely, therefore, you should maintain this vipassana through analyzing the meaning of identitylessness with wisdom, as explained before. He explains this in the chapter just previous to this, the Vipassana chapter. If you practice only analytical meditation, the shamatha you developed previously will decline. Thus you should analyze and then sustain it while mounted on the horse of shamatha and continue to alternate with periods of stabilizing meditation. Furthermore, if by doing too much analytical meditation your stillness decreases, then you should restore this stillness by practicing stabilizing meditation again and again. But if you do too much stabilizing meditation, you will become averse to analysis, and even when you do it, analyze, it will be of no use. If it happens that you get entirely wrapped up in stillness, then you should do a lot of analytical meditation if you meditate in this way, all the while balancing the aspects of shamatha vipassana. Then your practice will gain great force. As it says in the final volume of the famous text by Kamalashila, the Bhavanakrama, which has 3 parts, or 3 volumes, the stages of meditation. Moreover, when one has cultivated vipassana, wisdom has become predominant, then at that time the shamatha decreases. Therefore, like a butter lamp placed in the wind, the mind keeps moving, so it cannot see suchness very clearly. Therefore, at that point, one must cultivate shamatha. But if the shamatha becomes predominant, then like a person falling asleep, one will not be able to see suchness very clearly. Similarly, then, when this takes place, one should cultivate wisdom. So the balance between the two, we're quite familiar with that idea. A little bit different way of implementing it here than we're probably used to. When you sustain analysis in this way, it makes no sense to maintain that whatever conceptualizations pertaining to this are necessarily conceptualizations by which one holds things to be real by grasping to science, so they should be stopped. So this is Sankhya sort of parroting comments that have been made by other teachers, presumably Kagyu teachers in particular. This is because, as I have demonstrated many times before, the conceptualizations that hold things to be real are only one kind of conceptualization. If you believe that anything held by conceptualization must be crushed with reasoning, this means you have fallen into the fault of repudiating what actually exists. By denying with your reasoning something that is too broad. So this is an example of superimposition and denigration. He's saying he would be denigrating emptiness by abandoning to an extreme, abandoning conceptualization too far, by abandoning all conceptualization, asserting that some conceptualization is helpful in continuing to deepen your understanding, realization, and experience of the true nature of reality. I've demonstrated this is not the meaning of the scriptures. Now you may think, it is not like that with regard to other entities, but with regard to their actual nature, whatever way in which it is held by cognition must involve a grasping to science in the form of clinging to things as real. So he has an objection, let's say an opponent here that he's posing a question in the mouth of, who's saying, well, maybe it's not like that with regard to other things that we might talk about, like relative entities, but with regard to the nature of entities, of really any entity, whatever way in which it is held by cognition, must be done so by grasping at signs in the form of clinging to things as if they are real. That, in other words, any use of conceptuality to understand emptiness by any of the means that are possible through conceptuality must function by an acceptance of things as having actual characteristics by which I can distinguish them and therefore come to conclusions about their nature. So he says, indeed, the mode of grasping is a problematic fault, but not everything held by cognition is a problem. So he's saying that if you hold in your cognition if you cling with your cognition to the true nature of things as existing, that is a problem. But if you cling to relative phenomena as being relative phenomena, that doesn't have to be a problem. If you recognize that they are not truly existent, but you maybe not, cling is maybe not the best word, but you do conceptualize phenomena as being different, by distinguishable by its signs, by characteristics, by their function, and that is not necessarily a problem. He says this is proven by the statement, those with a confined outlook who strive for liberation must investigate suchness through many doors of scripture and reasoning. Now that presumably is a quote from, it's unclear, maybe a sutra, maybe another Tibetan or Indian writer, but unfortunately we don't have any reference for them. In this case, you may think if meditation on suchness is practiced. Oh, Sue.
So is that the same as once you've analyzed, you can rest in that? You don't have to keep doing it. So you, in terms of the nature
And
of the characteristics of.
that's what the respondent is saying. The opponent is saying that, but Sankara is quoting this phrase from somewhere that says, "No, you should investigate. You should investigate suchness with scripture and reason. You should continue to do that."
To continue to investigate.
Suchness with many doors of scripture and reason.
But we were talking about relative before, right? When you're talking about suchness, is that the suchness of the relative thing?
Suchness is always an absolute. Suchness is
Right.
always,
So, but weren't we talking about relative before? So
he was
you're
talking about
investigating
understanding the
suchness through
ultimate through
many
relative.
doors. Okay.
He was talking about understanding the ultimate through relative, through conceptual signs. And one person is saying we should let go of all conceptuality, and he's saying no, there's some conceptuality is helpful,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the crux of the argument. In this case, you might think of meditation on suchness as practice in order to give rise to non-conceptuality. It will not arise from discerning conceptual analysis, since cause and effect must be similar in nature. And this is universally the most common logical reasoning that's used to eschew the traditions of using logic and intellectual analysis of any kind in meditation. Is that there's this idea that these are fundamentally different realms, the conceptual mind and the non-conceptual mind, and conditionality, interdependence, causality, all must function within a logical framework of like things producing like things interacting with like things, so that we don't see, to use the famous example, a barley seed producing rice and vice versa. Rice seeds sprout rice plants, and barley seeds create barley plants. And conceptual mind and non-conceptual mind are very different, and the argument is that there's no way the conceptual mind can ever turn itself into non-conceptual mind, because one thing cannot turn into another thing. And so that's the premise of many traditions, is that as long as you're still using conceptuality, it's not going to become non-conceptual mind. And so that's the main quandary for all traditions, is how do we make that leap then from non-conceptual mind to from conceptual mind to non-conceptual mind? Neil.
Could you just say something a little, sorry, could you just say something as to what exactly non-conceptual mind is?
Yeah. So non-conceptual mind is primordial wisdom, is prajna of an individual who has experienced the path of seeing, have a direct non-conceptual cognition. But let's see, let me broaden it out. Non-conceptual mind is, let's see, to be comprehensive, it's helpful to understand that we all experience non-conceptual mind like all the time. Our senses are said to be non-conceptual, so they have non-conceptual cognition. And then the sixth mind is said to be unique in that it has the capability of being both either conceptual or non-conceptual. And so there is this notion of cognition being non-conceptual, that it does not function through a conceptualized image, through a general image, which is the way conceptuality works. Conceptuality separates itself from a specifically characterized phenomena and creates an internal image that becomes the focus of cognition.
But that image, of course, is conceptual. So do we control that non-conceptual mind at all?
Oh, no, we don't control that.
We don't. Okay. Thank you.
So it's a little bit of an elusive question. Now, who's we?
Yes.
And
Do
what do
I?
you mean? What do you mean by control?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
But my take on that is that we don't control conceptual mind. We non-conceptual mind. I think you said non-conceptual, right?
Non-conceptual. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, we control conceptual mind. We can, we develop our concepts. We change our concepts. We can become, what Sankara is proposing is that you develop a more and more subtle concept of what emptiness is, what the true nature of reality is, and well, we'll see what he's proposing. But Cynthia.
I just wanted to say when you say that we do control our conceptual mind, it's like to some degree we think we do, right? But it's not entirely clear that we really do, in the sense
Yeah,
of
thank you. Yeah.
habitual.
Well, there's no we, and
Right.
even if there is a we, there's the idea of controlling anything is not accurate because everything arises through interdependent
Right.
origination. So, like the fact that you expand your concept of war or peace or whatever is something that comes about by the process of reading or talking or investigating, learning other points of view, looking at your point of view and seeing how it might be limited or whatever. So there's not like a simple we control anything, as Cynthia's saying. But for the purposes of like what we're talking about in terms of like a meditative framework, in meditation, we certainly try to relax the conceptualizing process. And to the extent that we're successful, conceptualization is diminished. And we have a non conceptual experience of the meditative object. And so the question is, how do we go from that conceptualized mind to a non conceptual mind? And again, in the Buddhist pramana, logic, or valid cognition tradition, there is this notion that perception happens on a non-conceptual way through the five senses, and then that sense data is transferred to the sixth consciousness, which has an instant of non-conceptual cognition of the sense consciousness. And then it instantly forms a replica of it within the sixth consciousness, which becomes the object of subsequent cognition of that object and changes from a non-conceptual mind to a conceptual mind. So how do we go the other way? How do we change from a conceptual mind that's contemplating or engaging with a conceptualized version of something that we experience through our five senses? How do we go back to the non-conceptual experience? So Tsongkhapa replies, on this point, the Bhagavan himself has given a clear answer. As it says in the Kashyapa chapter, the 43rd chapter of the Ratnakuta Sutra. So the Ratnakuta Sutra is sometimes described as one sutra with 46 chapters, or sometimes it's described as 46 different sutras that are connected together in a group called the Ratnakuta collection. And there's one either chapter or sutra in that collection or sutra called the Kashyapa questions from the Bodhisattva Kashyapa. It's actually, the title is something about something about non-conceptual mind, interestingly. But the Buddha gives this analogy in there. Oh, Kashyapa, it's like this. If, for example, two sticks were rubbed together, were rubbed each against the other by the wind, fire would spring from them. This idea that naturally caused fire often is due to the rubbing together of dead branches by the wind that creates enough friction sometimes to create a spark, and you have a fire. Once fire has emerged, the two sticks burn away. So the fire burns up the sticks, the trees, and so forth. In the same way, O Kashyapa, there's authentically discerning conceptual analysis. The faculty of an Arya's wisdom will arise. So here, the non-conceptual mind that really, I think, Neil was asking about, what is non-conceptual mind of when we're talking about a wisdom mind, as opposed to a direct sense, direct non-conceptual sense experience. What is the non-conceptual wisdom mind? That's really the question, because there's non-conceptual sixth consciousness that happens in that first flash of a moment of engagement with the sense cognition that's non-conceptual. But we're told that wisdom mind is defined as non-dual and non-conceptual, and its object is the true nature of phenomena, which is in a little bit of an elusive situation. If their true nature is emptiness, does that actually function as an object or not? So the Buddha is saying the thoughts rub against each other. Our conceptuality challenges itself when we look at how our conceptual mind works, by doing such things as we are doing now and talking about, well, what is conceptuality? How does conceptuality work? We can eventually come to a point where our conceptual mind undermines its momentum to maintain or perpetuate further conceptual mentation, further conceptual mental activity. And then there's an experience, let's say, of non-conceptual wisdom mind, which here is called the faculty of an Arya's wisdom will arise. So here, an Arya is one who has achieved the path of seeing or beyond. So the path of seeing is defined as a non-conceptual experience of the true nature of reality. And so that is the wisdom that arises when one becomes an Arya, is non-conceptual understanding of the nature of reality. And the faculty that understands that nature of reality, non-conceptuality, is the wisdom. It's wisdom mind. So that's the faculty. When it has arisen, it burns away that authentically discerning conceptual analysis itself. So he's calling it authentically discerning conceptual analysis because it resulted in the emergence of the wisdom mind. So it's authentic. That discerning conceptual analysis, sometimes it's an elusive term that gets translated differently in almost every place you see it. It's often called individually examining wisdom, or various other ways of describing this wisdom, prajna, and that conceptual type of mental activity called individual analysis or authentically discerning conceptual analysis burns itself away. And so then the Arya's wisdom will arise. So that's also a bit of an elusive statement. Can the non-conceptual wisdom of an Arya, can it arise? Can it change? If it's given rise to, will it disappear? Basically, we're told that anything that arises ends, comes to an end. And so we're often told that nirvana does not arise, does not end. Suchness does not arise, it does not end. There is no beginning and no end. It's uncreated, non-dwelling, and unceasing is generally the terminology used. So when they say that an Arya's wisdom arises, is that an accurate description or not? What is the alternative? Cynthia, and then we'll go to Niels.
Well, what came to mind for me was like all those metaphors of how Buddha nature is uncovered. And so it's the idea of it becomes sort of revealed or uncovered or discovered rather than that it actually arises.
That is the general, yeah, exactly. That's the explanation, is that when it's not covered, it is experienced. It functions somehow. Neil.
So yeah, just to I agree with Cynthia. I guess the word arises was a problem for me. I guess it's just like becomes clear, or as the obscuration is removed. It's always been there, so you simply get to that point. But that's part of the problem. And not to get too hung up on the language, which of course I always do, but it just seems so tautological. You won't know what it is until it occurs, and when it occurs, then you'll know what it is. And there seems to be no way to otherwise identify it.
As you get, we're told that as you get closer to it, you begin to understand more clearly what it is.
Mm-hmm. No, that I can believe. It's definitely a dynamic, a process. It just seems that the definitions, of course, are somewhat tautological.
But yeah, but the part that's black and white, so to speak, here is that primordial or wisdom mind cannot function by definition. It can't arise. So that's like really clear. So there has to be some other way of explaining what happens at the point when conceptuality burns itself up. So conceptuality burns itself up. What is that? Is that like the gap that we've all experienced and we talk about all the time? Presumably similar, maybe a greater, like of a different order by a factor of many degrees. Christy, and then Cynthia.
My conceptual mind is trying to thread together a lot of different things right now, and what I raised my hand for just vaporized.
That happens. Oh no.
But I this thing about the inseparability of samsara and nirvana keeps coming up, and thinking about conceptual and non-conceptual, and maybe that those are two different. Maybe they're not related, and maybe I'm just trying to pair them together. But does that seem right to connect those conversations, or are they two different?
It's a little bit different in that, we might say that nirvana is the realm of non-conceptuality.
Mm-hmm.
And from the point of view of that realm, there is no samsara or nirvana. So there's no difference between something that doesn't exist. When they say there's no difference between samsara and nirvana, they're really being a sort of slightly elusive, using a logical argument that goes way back, which is that you can't differentiate between two phenomena if the two phenomena are not existent phenomena.
Oh,
And so the point is like you can't actually identify either one of those as actually existent. So really, you can't differentiate between any relative things because they don't actually exist.
even though nirvana is you know, seeing clearly.
Well, there's the experience of nirvana, but nirvana itself, it would not be described as as seeing clearly. You know, the experience of nirvana, or being in nirvana, so to speak, is accompanied by the quality of seeing clearly.
Right. Thank you.
We'll come back. Let us know if it comes back. Uh, Sue, did you have something directly on that before we go
Well,
to
just
Cynthia?
that this authentically discerning conceptual analysis is um, you are using conceptual analysis to look at things that don't exist, since nothing does. So you're seeing, so that's, and so even looking back at him when he's saying, okay, this is what this text says back in the last piece, and this is, it's just working on them. These don't fit. Um, he's using his authentic, discerning conceptual analysis to look at the texts that have come and see if they are describing um, reality as he is understanding it. But then when you use that, then it disappears. They burn each other up, right?
Ultimately,
So,
yeah.
um, so, so I mean, we train to do that, right? To be able to
Indeed,
discern.
indeed.
Yeah, it's worth doing.
Nobody's arguing with that, that's for sure. Cynthia.
So I guess two things. One is in terms of that sort of samsara nirvana question. In one sense, you could also say the reason why is that, or that all those opposites like good, bad, north, south, east, west, whatever, and nirvana and samsara, all of those things are part and parcel of conceptuality. And so in that sense, uh, when you get beyond conceptuality, then it's like both of those kind of, in a sense, no longer make sense as polar opposites or whatever. In terms of you would ask the question of what happens when concept burns itself up, or what does that mean anyway? And so I don't know for sure, but I mean, on one level, it seems like I mean, they say what we have to do is kind of work through all the habitual tendencies and propensities of the Alaya Vijnana, and that's because that's what sort of perpetuates our conceptual thinking. And so basically, kind of, uh, however we work through those, whether through practice, through whatever it is, that essentially we have to incinerate that whole collection of seeds and habitual tendencies. That's all.
It takes a long time.
Yeah,
It's a lot
I
of,
mean, in terms of
that's a lot
the
of burning.
mechanics.
It's a lot of stuff to
Yes,
burn. Thus he states that the wisdom of an Arya arises from discerning conceptual awareness. As it says in the middle volume of the Stages of Meditation by Kamala Shila, for this reason a yogana investigates thoroughly with wisdom. He finds that ultimately he cannot definitely apprehend any essential nature in any functioning thing. Why does he say any functioning thing?
do you mean why did he call it a functioning thing
Yeah,
as opposed to just a thing?
yeah. Functioning makes it a real thing
Yeah, I guess, I
in
mean,
a relative sense.
isn't it part of the definition of thing that it
It
has to have
is.
a function? So,
The thing is that which performs the function.
so it sounds like he's just kind of like trying to emphasize, I'm talking about the formal definition of thing.
I'm talking about real things.
Yeah.
You know, the alternative would be non-functioning things, and it's sort of like, okay, so he apprehend he sees that there's no nature of non-functioning things. We all know that. It's the functioning things that we're hung up on, right? We say, well, it performs a function and must have some nature. How can it do something if it has no nature? At that moment, the yogin enters a totally non-conceptual samadhi. He just enters when you cannot definitely apprehend any essential nature. One then realizes the very non-existence of essential natures in all phenomena. So that's the pervasion. You understand that in one phenomena, and thereby you understand that same situation in all phenomena. If someone does not meditate after analyzing discerningly and with wisdom the essential nature of functioning things, but rather completely abandons bringing anything to mind and just meditates, this will never overcome conceptualization. Nor will such a person ever realize the non-existence of essential natures, because there is no light of wisdom. Thus, from authentically discerning conceptual analysis itself comes the fire of knowing what is authentically as it is. If that emerges, it burns the stick, you might say sticks of concepts, as does the fire that comes from rubbing sticks together. This was declared by the Bhagavad. So everybody's quoting this same sutra by the Buddha of the sticks of concepts rubbing themselves into oblivion. If this were not so, then the stainless could never emerge from the stained. So he continues to use this clunky language of things that are very, are basically completely different nature, having a causal relationship, which is very odd. Buddhas can never emerge from sentient beings, and Aryas can never emerge from ordinary people, because in each of those pairs, cause and effect are dissimilar, disalike. In his commentary on Bodhicitta, the Bodhicitta Vivarana, and in the commentary, so this is by Nagarjuna, famous text of Nagarjuna's, that is a bit controversial because it has these interesting statements in it that go beyond the sort of very formal, circumscribed idea of what prasangika madhyamaka is. And it appears sort of late in the historical record, and many scholars don't accept it as really authored by Nagarjuna. But anyway, whatever conceptualization appears, how could there be, wherever conceptualization appears, how could there be emptiness? Neither the aspect of a mind that analyzes, nor that which is analyzed is seen by any of the Tathagatas. So the idea is the Tathagatas, they don't make the mistake of seeing things that aren't there, that aren't real. And these are two not real things. Not real functioning things. The mind that analyzes, nor that which is analyzed is seen by any of the Tathagatas. Where there is analysis, where something analyzed, there is no enlightenment. That's the experience of a deluded mind, thinking that there's something to be analyzed and something that analyzes. When you know that either of those actually exist, then you have the mind of enlightenment. Here Nagarjuna teaches that while reifying that which is analyzed and that which analyzes, there is no achievement of enlightenment. However, if one were to reject the wisdom of discerning analysis and simply reject that which is analyzed and that which analyzes, this would contradict the scriptural statement that one establishes suchness through the many doors of discerning conceptual analysis. So he says, this state of there being no perception of things that don't exist, including the object analyzed and the analyzing mind, is a final stage. If you don't do those activities, you will never reach that stage. Furthermore, if neither of those two, that is, neither the mind that analyzes nor that which is analyzed, were seen by the Buddhas, then it would follow that they do not exist at all. As it states in the same work by Kamalashila, whoever meditates on emptiness, known as non-arising, emptiness, or identitylessness, as one of an inferior nature, is not meditating on any of them. So, if you meditate on emptiness as if it has these qualities, then you're not meditating on emptiness, because emptiness has no qualities. And so he lists these three qualities, which are these translators' way of conveying what are called the three doors of liberation. Non-arising is the signlessness. Emptiness is the emptiness door of liberation, and non-arising is non-expectation, the Dharma door of not expecting. And then there's the Dharma door of emptiness and the Dharma door of signlessness or identitylessness.
Wait, you said signlessness for the first one and the last one.
Right, I tried to acknowledge I had made a mistake, and the first one is the expectation or wishlessness.
Oh, that's wish. Okay, sorry, I didn't hear you say wishlessness.
And so emptiness is emptiness.
Yes. So
Yeah.
the three Dharma doors to liberation are, usually they're given in the order of emptiness, identitylessness or signlessness, and wishlessness or absence of expectation. This statement does not reject meditation that focuses upon identitylessness, the emptiness, that is the absence of something arising by an inherent nature, but it does reject a lesser meditation on emptiness, one which is of an inferior nature because it holds on to those absences as being real aspects of something. It is just as it says.
Is that the definition of identity? The lessness, the emptiness that is the absence of something arising by an inherent nature?
Yes.
Right.
As it says in the text, the praise of the one who's gone beyond the world, which is, so Nagarjuna has three types of texts. The ones on logic, including the root of the middle way. And then he has texts, the second collection of texts is on the path, includes things like the precious garland and letter to a friend that describe the path, both the path of accumulating merit and the path of accumulating wisdom. Then he has a group of texts called praises, and one of them is of the one who's gone beyond the world, called Loka Tita Stava. Loka is world, and Atita is beyond, and Stava is sort of established beyond the world, meaning one who is You reveal the nectar of emptiness, excuse me, in order to clear away every kind of conceptual fabrication. But if anyone were to cling to that, you would reproach that one severely. And then it is Jewel Garland wrote novelly, thus there is nothing to focus upon in identity or identitylessness, absolutely just as it is. For this reason, the great sage refuted views of both identity and identitylessness. An interesting way of expressing letting go of seeing the emptiness of phenomena. According to R.A. Nagarjuna, page 108, since one cannot establish either identity or identitylessness as existing, he says absolutely or actually, the view that either option could exist absolutely must be refuted. But this does not reject the view that things are without identity. Fine distinction. You can just you need to reject the view of things being without, being with identity. You need to reject that, but you can't establish the opposite. As quoted previously from Ending All Debates, the Nagarjuna's Vigraha Vyavartani, this is true because of the following. If it were not the case that there is no inherent nature by which phenomena can be inherently determined, then phenomena would be determined as inherently existent.
So one of the things about this chapter that I found challenging is that, and that this is common obviously to their tradition, I think, of how they explain things, is the constant use of negatives and double negatives.
Yeah, a lot of that. A lot of
I found myself having to go back and reread them and invert it into, I mean, I don't know whether that's just because of the strong emphasis on negation in general, but
I think so.
you know, that way they're afraid, because otherwise they're afraid they'll slip into saying that something.
Yeah. Oh my God.
But it does make it hard sometimes to unpack these things.
Yeah, the double, triple negatives. Let's see, on this point it says in the summary of the Exalted Transcendent Wisdom Sutra, even if a bodhisattva thinks these aggregates are empty, one engages with signs. This is not faith in the place of non-arising. So if you assert that things are empty, and you're stuck on believing in emptiness. The Great Mother Sutra says if you engage with empty forms or identitylessness, then you're engaging with signs.
But
But this
what,
is not engaging.
going back, what's the faith? Because it
This
was
is
like comparing signs
faith
versus
is just
faith.
their way of his in that text. It's the Buddha's way of saying this is not a correct understanding of non-arising. If you assert that things are empty, then you don't really have true faith in the fact of non-arising.
Is that because you're naming things as things?
Yeah, you're recognizing things as being identifiable.
But it, but
Yeah,
it seems to imply that truly having clarity about, emptiness is only on faith. And so it makes you wonder, what is faith?
Yeah, that's a very different topic. Here
Yeah.
they're using faith as a sort of as a synonym or in its sense of confidence. Then you don't have confidence or
Confidence.
trust.
Hmm.
Maybe trust in emptiness. If you assert emptiness, then you don't have trust in emptiness. You don't actually understand it. Cynthia.
I was just thinking, okay, going back to that other little short 2-page thing that we read before that was talking about, analysis of the aggregates and all those things. And so I was wondering, does this actually align with that or contradict in a sense? Like in that verse where it says the 5 aggregates and all the other things, ayatanas and all that stuff, are dependently related and lack any nature at all. So that's what that little verse said. Is that in the context of this one that we just read, would that also be lacking faith, or is that somehow kosher? I'm not sure.
Yeah, because Manjushri said it, it's okay.
Thank goodness. Yeah.
And I think the nuance is that he didn't think it. He just said it. And this one says if a bodhisattva thinks.
I mean, it's not just the words that are different, like lacking any nature versus saying it's empty. It's not that distinction. It's just more that this is probably implying that if you're thinking it, that you're clinging somewhat somehow.
I think it's both. I think it's also the use of the term empty as being a quality of something.
And you think lack any nature is more precise, perhaps?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's generally that's way more preferred than the positive. Saying
Right.
things are empty is sort of a
Yes.
positive,
But back to the negatives
right?
again. Yes. Yes.
Yeah, got to
Okay.
use the negatives. Suppose Suppose you say that the meaning of all these quotations is that one should hold emptiness and the like to exist as real, because if one did not do so, then one would have no faith in the place of non-arising. But this is untenable, because then to have faith in that place would automatically mean you are acting with signs. You're signing, you're speaking sign language. It's so funny, the terms signs. As it says in that same sutra, when you have thoroughly understood that no phenomena has any nature of all, then this is the activity of supreme transcendent wisdom. So this is the non-conceptual wisdom of an Arya, the supreme transcendent wisdom that has no such activity. Also, when with wisdom you have destroyed both things composed and uncomposed, as well as things either positive or negative, until not even one atom remains upon which to focus. If this purifies the world, then it can be classified as transcendent wisdom. Which is another quote which sort of violates its own the rules that we've been going through, right? As it says in the King of Samadhi, Samadhi Raja Sutra, if you investigate with discernment the identitylessness of phenomena, and having analyzed, you meditate on what you discovered. This is a cause for attaining the fruition of nirvana. No other cause can bring you to this place. Peace. And that has so many problems in it, it's like laughable. So let's start from the end. There's a cause for attaining the fruition of nirvana. But it is the attainment, not a cause for nirvana. So, maybe that's okay. A cause for the attainment makes sense, but not a cause for nirvana itself. But there is a meditation on what you have discovered. What is that? This is the anomaly in the whole thing, where generally they're unwilling to talk at all about what it is that discerning wisdom understands or experiences. And all they do is negate. But here we have this very clear indication that there is a discovery. Then in the heart of transcendent wisdom, which we know very well, when Shariputra asks how we should train as someone who wants to act in the profound transcendent wisdom of a bodhisattva, Avalokiteshvara answers, you must regard these 5 aggregates as being absolutely and completely empty of inherent nature. So this makes the mistake too of saying you need to regard them as empty. So it's all language and like who's saying it. So it's one of those situations where you have to know what they're getting at in order to not be tripped up by the words, the verbiage. If you hold that previous position, then you would contradict these and many other scriptural passages. Furthermore, it states in the praise of the absolute space of phenomena. So this is a text, interestingly, that's quoted frequently by those who hold to the third turning of the wheel of the Dharma and the teachings on Buddha nature and so forth, which is very much not the tradition of the Gelugpa and Tsongkhapa. So it's interesting that he's quoting from this text called the Dharmadhatu Stava, praise to the Dharmadhatu. The highest state of mind, the Dharma that purifies, is the absence of any nature. So the Dharma that purifies, the highest state of mind, is the absence of any nature, the Dharma of the absence of any nature. Sort of walking this fine line between negation and affirmation. Also, as long as you hold to a me and a mind, so long will you impute an outer world. But if you see the two ways in which no identity exists, then the seeds for cyclic existence will come to an end. That one's perfect, right? There's no affirmation, and there's just saying samsara comes to an end. The end of samsara makes sense because it was caused, but the arising or the origination of nirvana does not make sense. As it says in A Guide to the Middle Way, which is Sujata Kirti's main text, Madhyamaka Avatar, therefore viewing me and mine as empty, the yogi becomes totally free. So here are a little bit slippery, and if you view them as empty, you should come to an understanding according to these statements and then continuously sustain your ascertainment of identitylessness and the non-existence of inherent nature. So basically what he's saying is the sort of conversations that we're having, this sort of effort to understand the subtleties of what's being expressed as being the wisdom of an Arya. What is it that this wisdom understands? Is it the refutation of an assertion, or is there something that's experienced? Is it a total non-experience, or is it an experience? So these sort of things are what we should be examining in our meditation practice according to this tradition. You should come to an understanding according to these statements and then continuously sustain your ascertainment of identitylessness and the non-existence of inherent nature. On this point, it says in the first volume of Kamala-Shila's Stage of Meditation, and a dharani for entering into non-conceptuality, avikalpa pravesha dharani, which is the dharani on which is the root text for Maitreya's Dharma Dharmatava Bhanga that we went through a couple of years ago. It is said, by not directing your attention, you will abandon the signs of form and so forth. So that's a nice way to put it, is not directing attention, not continuing to have focused cognitive experience. Here the intent of the phrase not directing attention is that whatever you investigate with wisdom will disappear. I love that. And if you remember when we did this text, the main point of that text is cultivation of non-conceptual wisdom. And that text is attributed to Maitreya. Based on this text that's in the sutra section of the Buddha. Here the intent of the phrase not directing attention is that whatever you investigate with wisdom will disappear. But this does not mean that you are simply not directing attention at all. Nor does it mean that just by abandoning mental engagement, as in the meditative absorption devoid of discernment, which is one of the meditative absorptions of the formless realm. In terms of the scheme of the meditative absorptions, there's the 4 stages of the form realms, the 4 absorptions of the form realm stages, and then there's the 4 formless realm absorptions. And so, in this, in one of them called devoid of discernment, which I think is the last one, highest one, there's no mental engagement, and it's notoriously said to be not equivalent to nirvana, nor does it produce nirvana, the experience of enlightenment. So he's saying it does not mean that just by abandoning mental engagement, as in that meditation, you could abandon the insistent clinging to form and so on that you have had since time of that beginning. And they assert this because a number of meditators have experienced that absorption state, and when they rise from that absorption, they still have clinging to existence. It's like Sarah's 16 years in absorption, and as soon as he wakes up, he's asking for his radish yogurt. Honey, where's that radish yogurt you were making me 16 years ago? Still fixated on it. So with regard to all the statements in scripture where it says that by meditating with mental engagement one abandons wholly to signs, the true intent is this: once you have investigated correctly with analytical wisdom, oh my God, we're over time, and not one atom of that upon which you have been focusing, when grasping to things as real any longer appears, then you enter into meditative equipoise on the meaning of this realization. So one more time, once you've investigated correctly with analytical wisdom and experienced the result, which is not one atom of that upon which you've been focusing any longer appears, then you enter into meditative equipoise on the meaning of the realization of the identitylessness of all phenomena. Kama Shil again, whatever the mind may be, when you seek it out, you realize it is empty. Whatever state of mind with which you realize, when you thoroughly seek out its essential nature, you will realize it is empty. Realizing in this way, you enter into the yoga without signs. So this is, there was something previous to that, this excerpt in Kamala Shila's text, which had to do with realizing the emptiness of phenomena as being mind. So this is the traditional scheme of the 4 absolute bodhicitta slogans. Regard all dharmas as dreams, contemplate nature, unborn awareness. So he's going through the stages of understanding of identitylessness. This teaches that one should enter into signlessness itself precisely after doing a thorough analysis beforehand. It shows with extreme clarity that with nothing more than the complete absence of mental engagement, or without analyzing the essential nature of functioning things with wisdom, it is impossible to enter into total non-conceptuality itself. The Jewel Cloud, the Rana Mega Sutra, states this, and accordingly says that if you do not discover the view of suchness by correctly analyzing beforehand, then it will be impossible to enter into a non-conceptual state with regard to the meaning of suchness. Sankapa trying to drill home his point of view here. So we'll stop here. Final question, Cynthia.
So I just, in the first paragraph, it says, not one atom of that upon which you had been focusing when grasping any longer appears, and then you enter equipoise. So are we talking about like literally no longer seeing things, or like not seeing things as things? It makes it sound quite literal in that way.
Yeah, it's usually presented as in the general way of no longer perceiving or apprehending. It's usually described as no longer an apprehension of things. But actually, in certain Gelugpa texts, I've seen reference to this idea that when you reach this stage, you actually experience a sort of perceptual voidness.
I know that, yeah, in some concepts they do say that ultimately when you get to this whatever station, that you do see differently. You actually, you know, your sensory experience is actually altered in some way. But I guess that's what we're talking about here.
It could be. It could be either of those two varieties of you actually experience a conceptual blankness, or it's just a description of no longer registering any phenomena,
When you,
signs, or
so when you
characters.
say no longer apprehending things, by apprehending you mean you don't apprehend them as things like our conventional things like tables, chairs, and all that, or no
A
longer,
sort of deeper level. You don't apprehend the signs that led you to the conclusion of tables and chairs. You
which
don't apprehend colors
shapes
and
and colors, all of
shades.
that's gonzo.
Right.
Okay,
So, yeah,
check.
if you can remind me that I'll find this place in a book by Hopkins. It might even be the same one he did his translation, where he describes this experience of hitting this conceptual blankness. It's sort of interesting. If you could remind me, that would be very helpful. Just
I
send me
will
a
try
little
to do
email.
that.
So let's take a quick look at our syllabus. Next week we have Karma Shakme. Oh, that's a simple text. So let's finish up Sankara next week. Shall we dedicate? By this merit, may all attain omniscience, may defeat the enemy wrongdoing, from the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. By the confidence of the golden sun of the great east, may the lotus garden of the Rigdon's wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be the spell. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice to
Thank
see you.
you.
Good night.
Take care. Good night, Susan.
Bye.